Hello and welcome to another edition of Urban Talks at the Center for Architecture and Metropolitan Planning in Prague. This is a series of lectures that we have every month where we invite experts from different countries and different fields to talk about what they do in urban planning and design and architecture. Today we have a very special guest coming to us from Gothenburg. Her name is Helena Bjarnegård, and Helena is Sweden's first state architect, and she has been so since the beginning of 2019. Formerly, she worked at White Arkitekter. Later, she was the main city gardener for the city of Göteborg, where she led the managing office. So we'll also talk about that. And today, we'll talk about what a state architect actually is, what she does, and what are the challenges that lie ahead. Helena, thanks to have. It's glad to have you here. Hi.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
How are you? How's everything in Gothenburg?
Oh, I'm fine. Thank you. Maybe I'm a little bit tired in my eyes because I've been looking at the computer all day long, sitting in digital meetings. But otherwise, I'm fine, very fine, thank you. Well, the weather is fine. The sun has been out all day, and so on.
Well, that's great, and thanks for spending a few more virtual minutes with an hour with us here at camp. You have a presentation for us about what you do, right?
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Without further ado, what you do.
We do.
What you do.
Actually.
So please, what is a state architect? Show us and tell us.
Yeah, what is a state architect? A lot of people ask me that question. I work at the National Agency for Housing, Building and Planning in Sweden, and I'm also pointed out as the chairperson for the government's Council for Sustainable Cities. So I really work, what do I do at work? I lead a lot of groups of people doing things that's about architecture on a national level. We work with societal challenges, societal change. We are not working with building projects or sketching and so on. We work with laws, financing, spreading knowledge, building networks, and trying really hard to implement the new policy on architecture that the government decided upon in 2018. And we're hooking arm with a lot of people to do so. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about this work that we do, a lot of people together on a national level today, and give you some examples on this. So.
Perfect, thank you very much. So we'll just, if anyone has any questions, they can do so at slido.com, hashtag camponline. So if you have any questions for Helena, we'll have some Q&A in the end. And now, for the time being, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Architecture and design, tools in tackling society's biggest challenges. We're trying to think of architecture and design as very, very important tools to that we can use in developing a sustainable society. We're not looking at if it should be a classical style or a modern style or so on, or just the surface. This is a bigger question, a much larger question than that. And really, it's all started in 2018 when the government decided upon a new policy for architecture, and it's called Policy for Designed Living Environments. And it's the Swedish new government policy for built environment. Of course, we had one before, as you all do in different countries in Europe, but this is the new one. And this time we really made a connection between sustainability and architecture and built environment. Actually, we're not alone doing this, because I'm sitting in this group on the EU level, talking to a lot of people in Brussels and meeting people from all countries in Europe. And actually, a lot of countries are working like this right now on a national level. So I guess maybe you are too. The new policy has 3 pillars. It's a government bill, a decision, policy for design living environment, and it includes goals for the policy area for sustainable cities. this bill is also a comprehensive national architecture policy. They were talking about having 2 documents, but this is really the architecture policy for the national level in Sweden. And we have a lot of state agencies building buildings, managing property and so on. And they're all supposed to read this policy and do what it says. At the same time, the government decided upon a Council for Sustainable Cities that is really 11 state agencies and some other organizations. And we should all work together with this, because one of the big challenges is stop working in pipes and start hooking arm and working together, because this is such a wide area. So we need to be so many people with different knowledge working together to get this going and to get the society in this direction. Designed living environment. It's about architecture, design, cultural heritage, and art, and how all those areas can be a part of the living environment for people in cities and also on the countryside. So it's not just an architecture policy, it's wider than that. And when we talk about architecture, we really talk about city planning level, buildings, landscape, and down to every detail, as in interior design and design of a chair and so on. So from the city development level down to the single chair and how you design it, how you organize this physical environment, and how you form it in many different scales. The policy really puts a connection between architecture and sustainability, and that's the important core message in this policy. And the policy talks about architecture as an instrument to meet societal challenges, and how all the environments that we build and develop and that we manage and have around us, how it really is important for our daily life, how it is important for us as human beings. That is a concern. It concerns our health, our well-being, if we meet our neighbors, if we can meet people that we have never met before, big challenges as segregation and so on. And of course also working with the climate challenges and biodiversity and energy and all that stuff. Really how we build, how we develop, and how we manage built environment, that is important for sustainability. I think it's important to talk about this and to really put the connection between those, because you can also see that if you look at the EU level, that the EU Green Deal is going to put a lot of finance into this area. And we need to explain that the physical environment is a part of the sustainability work in our societies. So far, when we work with sustainability, we talk about engines and energies and houses and the engineering part of it. But really, the design is also very important. How long is this building? How many crossroads do you have? How far is it to walk from your home to your school? Is it possible to walk? Is it possible to take a bicycle? Is it pleasant to walk or take a bicycle and to put the car aside, not even own a car? So how you build the cities and how you do this down to each detail, it's important for our daily life and for sustainability. As this is so broad, we are 4 agencies working very, very tight together. And it is the national agency of housing, planning and building, where I work. It's the Public Art Agency. It's the National Heritage Board and the Sweden Center for Architecture and Design. And we work very closely together with the design. The National Heritage Board is very important because a lot of the built environment is already built. And we need to think of, especially when we think of sustainability, how we can use the already built environment in a better way. Not tear it down, but to reuse, flexibility, use buildings in another way, transform them from offices to homes for people maybe, and so on, and how you can do that even so in the future. But it's not enough. We also need to work with other state agencies. So we have this Council for Sustainability and Sustainable Cities. And there we have those 4 agencies that I talked about, but also the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency, the Research Council, the Swedish Energy Agency, the Transport Administration, Agency for Participation, Association of Local Authorities, Vinnova, that is Sweden's Innovation Agency, and some other agencies. And we work together on this national level, hooking arm and putting all the knowledge, in one pot, working together. And we are supposed to support the cities. So our goal is to support the cities, not to build things in the cities, because the cities, they will build themselves and they will plan for themselves, because we have this system in Sweden that the cities really they decide what to build and how to build, but they need support, and we can support them from the national level. We can support them with legislation, with finance, with knowledge, with networks, with putting more money into research in the areas that they need, putting more money into innovation in the areas that they need, and so on. And we're also supposed to talk to the cities and ask them, what do you need? How can the government support you in any way? And we are supposed to report to the government to say that the cities, they do need this in the future, so do like this. So that's our goal as the council, our task. And why is it a sustainable city? Well, the world population is increasingly urban, with more than half living in cities today. And how can we make sure that cities are not only environmentally friendly, but also at the same time, not instead, but at the same time, also places where people can satisfy their social needs, are involved in democratic decision-making and processes, know their rights, and can have good lives. Here are all the different agencies working in the council. And the task was that I said that we are going to work with those policies decided upon by the government, coordinate our work, our measures, our projects to support the cities, and also lift to report to the government, we need to change this in this society, do this next year, and so on. Of course, we are working just like you, just like the rest of the world, with the Sustainable Development Goals. And when we use the goal 11, we try to think, how can we use this goal 11, sustainable cities and communities, as a docking station to meet all the other goals at the same time? So we start at goal 11 and try to reach the other goals by working with goal 11. That's the way we think. And the policy for designed living environment, the national policy, that is comprehensive national policy for all the state agencies all over Sweden. What does it say? Well, it says that architecture and design will help to create a sustainable, equitable, and less segregated society with carefully designed living environments in which everyone is well placed to influence the development of their shared environment. And all parties in Sweden stood behind this goal, so it's very, very strong actually. It says that architecture and design should be this tool to create a sustainable society, and that both the process and the projects are important, and that carefully designing the living environments, it's in the center to make this life better for people. And this will be achieved by ensuring that sustainability and quality are not made subservient to short-term financial considerations. Very, very hard goal to reach. We are talking to almost all the cities now, and especially the small cities in Sweden have a very hard time working like this. And we're trying to think, how can we support them? Can we come up with more research money, innovation money, to find new ways of calculating, new ways of evaluating quality and sustainability in the built environment in the city? How can we think long term? So this is a very hard clue. And if you have, I know the OECD work with this too. So a lot of worldwide organizations are into this goal, and we need to look outside Sweden to find the solutions. But we're working hard with this, and also in a dialogue with the cities. Knowledge in the fields of architecture and design is developed and disseminated. And we have this network with all the universities now. We invited them to our agency and to talk about, what do you need as a university? How can we support you? And we try to connect the universities and the cities, and say that the cities, they need knowledge. And I think that we need to change the way we teach people. We need to teach architects leadership. If they're going to take a wider leadership over the whole process in the future, we need to teach architect leaderships at the university level, for example. That's an important thing. The public sector acts as a role model. All the state agencies that really build buildings and manage buildings, they are supposed to act as a role model. And we're building this big network with all the strategic national agencies that are really building museums and culture and heritage buildings and all sorts of buildings and property. And we are networking and spreading knowledge, hooking arm, trying to, have high quality and sustainability in the future. Aesthetic, artistic, and cultural assets are preserved and developed. Working a lot with this, and environments are designed to be accessible for all. We have this accessibility agency in our network, for example, working a lot with those questions. Cooperation and collaboration are developed both nationally and internationally. Thank you for having me here today. That's a good thing. And we're also building those networks, working in the EU, working with Horizon Europe, and so on. And it's very important, because one person is not going to change the society. One agency is not going to do it. We need to be a lot of people working in this direction. That's the only way to do it, I think. So a movement of many people. So architecture and carefully designed environments. We're supposed to look at all scales. We're supposed to look at physical environment and the process. And we're supposed to look at the whole process, from planning new areas to building houses, homes, squares, parks, and managing too. So if we look at the regional scale, how do we work in Sweden? This is the southern part of Sweden, and when they're now making their new regional plan, they're having this strategy as the start-out point for all regional plan, hospitals, infrastructure issues, all the issues on how the different cities are going to connect in this region. They say that the strategy for living environments is the main goal that they start from when they do the region plan. The city level, this is Kiruna. We have a big exhibition at the Art and Architecture Center in Stockholm on Kiruna right now, and I think you can see a lot of it online actually. Kiruna, it's an example of the city scale, and it's not an ordinary example. It's a very exceptional example because they are going to move this whole town because of the mining industry. And how do you move a whole town? And a lot of artists and dialogue processes and a lot of professionals has been into this process, because we are not just moving buildings, we are moving people, their stories, their memories, and how do you do that? And that's also, you know, the core value in the strategy, that it's about people and their daily life. So how do we move people and their daily life when we're moving the city? And that's what that big exhibition at Arktes is all about. This policy is about big cities, small communities, rural areas. It's not just about urban areas and big cities, but a lot of the questions that are really important, they are about the dense cities. So we need to work with those a lot, of course, but also the connection between the cities and the countryside, and how we support the cities and the countryside and how they connect in different ways. One issue that is very important in the densities is the designed living environments for kids, for children. And we have seen really scary examples of daycare yards and so on, and we need to, point this out very carefully. So big cities, small communities, rural areas. Here is the environmental agency in Sweden building the nature rooms all over Sweden with the top-notch architects designing them, and they're all over Sweden now, and they're really combining nature and top design all over Sweden. Very nice projects. You need to see that if you come to Sweden. And the neighborhood scale, trying to do as in New York and Copenhagen, trying to make the car streets into pedestrian streets, maybe just for summer, but making places for people in different ways. The green areas, the ecosystem services, the biodiversity, and the place for people at the same time. Places in small towns, this was just asphalt, very, very boring, but now it's a very, very nice place in a very small town in northern Sweden. And the red color that you see on the picture is really the faluröd color that is made from the 1600s until now in this area. And it's really, you can see it all over the countryside, all over Sweden, the red cottages, and now it's here in a modern way. Places in the middle of Stockholm or in the middle of the countryside, important for people's stories, memories, and their stories in the future. Building scale and buildings, of course, very important. And here's a picture from Norrköping, and it's an old industrial area. We also with new buildings. And how can you add to this old environment? How can you manage the old buildings? How can you do as they continue to live with the new interiors and other people living in them and working in them, and at the same time adding something new? And at the same time, have those pedestrian streets that you can reach the water and walk through this area, keep it open to the people. It's about the inside rooms and the outside rooms. Here's a library in small village Alingsås, designed by Bornstein. And I told you, it's not just about architecture in all scales, it's about art, of course. And here is the monument that is a memorial from the catastrophe that happened in Thailand years ago in 2004, the tsunami. And this is made by people, by an artist, but in collaboration with a lot of people and the memories. And it's a place at the same time, and it works at one level in the summertime, and it works in another way in the wintertime in Sweden. So to see the seasons is very important too. And art is also a very important part of the dialogue, the process. Here is in Umeå in northern Sweden. Where are we going to sit at the square? Put out a lot of chairs and see where people sit. And from that knowledge that you build, you can make the plan of the square. Other pictures from the same project. And here's a process in Gothenburg. This really got 3 national architecture awards because of the process. And it's an old harbor area that is really very much in the middle of Gothenburg. And before doing anything else, they just tore the fence down, invited people, invited top architects from all over the world, talking to people, inviting people, making a process that they called exclude them in. The people that rarely is part of those dialogue were invited specially and said that those 2 hours, they're just for you, because you usually don't come to this dialogue when we're going to develop the city, but we invite you right now. So we had, this is from where I worked in Gothenburg, and we invited old ladies, and we invited very, very young kids from Algeria, for example, coming to Sweden the same year. And we had those promenades with them, talk to them, and then we build things together with the people. And then we hired a lot of people to make things to happen in this place. A sailing school, a summer school for kids, and so on. And see, how do people use this place? And all this knowledge, and this is temporary, all this knowledge is going to be a part of the plan for this area in the future. Where are we going to build the new homes? Where are we going to have the park in the future? Where are we going to have roads? And if we're going to have a park, what should be in it? So this is the Frihamnen project. And this is the sauna built by material from the place. It's very, very beautiful inside, actually, and it's very, very popular. So all the knowledge builds into the process and the comprehensive plan. Architecture and sustainability, I said before. And I showed you the sustainability goals and the goal 11 that we use as a docking station. Is it possible to think like this? Can we do that? Everybody should do that. I think we should think like this more, and we should spread this knowledge, thinking in this way. Because when I look at the EU level, when I look at Sweden, I can see that, for example, in innovation strategies and research strategies, we work with, as I said before, the engineering parts, the new engines and so on. And we also work with dialogue, and when we talk about democracy, we talk about dialogue and so on. But how often do we work with, the designing, the physical form? How big is this house? How large is the park? How is it designed? Is it pleasant for us people who will live there for 100, maybe 1,000 years if it's a city plan? And how the physical design, how can that help all the goals in this map? Here are some examples. The picture is from a hospital in Gothenburg. I worked with this project when 15 years ago, when I was working at White Arkitekter. It's a very, very long time ago. Maybe it's the last thing that I sketched, actually, for myself before I went this, talking person and writing person. If we look at this area, the researchers has been looking at this project and also at other projects and see that this environment that really makes the patients needing less medicine than they needed in the house that was there before. So the design really affects good health and well-being. And you all know the American research about if you look out from your hospital window at a tree, you recover more fast after an operation than if you don't have this window looking out. So research evidence says this. There's also research telling that if we have very good school environments, it's easier and for kids to learn in school. If you have a yard, you can run around and you break and you come in and you really is going to learn better. The physical environment and quality of education connects. And all those places, they're not just for patients or pupils, they're also for people who work there. And that's also important, the working areas. And how is that designed? If you work in a very stressed, we have the pandemic right now. When you go to have a coffee after working in the hospital, it's very important how this coffee break room looks, so you can, get your stress levels down and relax for a little bit before you're going out to meet another patient. So the physical environment is important and affects decent work and economic growth. Inequalities, reduce inequalities, gender equality. That's things that we worked a lot with in this Jubilee Park at Frihamnen in Gothenburg. For example, there are so many projects working with this. Who do you invite? This process about exclude them in, about telling elderly people and especially elderly women, you can come here those 2 hours and we have a dialogue just for you, instead of just inviting everybody and they will not say a word, I promise you. At least not some of them. Gender equality, how do you invite people in? And how do you listen to all those input that you get and make this physical environment really work for everybody, that you feel safe and welcomed, whoever you are? That's about design. Responsible consumption and protection, industry, innovation, infrastructure. I put this picture from a small factory at the small island of Tjörn on the west coast of Sweden. And it's a factory that builds homes for people who has not got very much money. And it's a factory which builds homes with very good materials that are good for the climate and earn energy and so on. And they build it in a very sustainable way. So how we build, what kind of material we use, that affects goal 12 and 9. This is a preschool, and it's a Danish architect coming to Sweden and trying to, design this preschool with just materials that has been used before in this city. So that's about affordable and clean energy and climate action. Maybe next time I want to have a picture of a house that is already there and how we can rebuild it. Because if you can let this maybe concrete structure be, not tear it down and build another concrete structure, but use it again, that's a very good thing for the climate, for example. Clean water and sanitation and life below water, everything about water, climate, the climate challenge and so on. We're going to have a lot of water in Sweden along the coastlines because the sea level is rising. And how are we going to make designed living environments that are good for people when you need to, you know, higher the level of the coastline 2 meters, and the city center is right there. How are you going to do it? You need to design it to manage the sea level and also do it as designed for people. Life on land and biodiversity. We all know this. This is from Stockholm. This is about taking care of the rainwater in the street, in a small garden in the street in the middle of Stockholm, instead of putting a pipeline and leading the water away. Peace and justice, strong institutions. And this is a picture from Malmö, where they have, since several years back, theme playgrounds all over the city, in different parts of the city. And they have this small bus taking kids from preschools around the city. And really they've seen that when the kids come home to their parents, they said, Mom and Dad, I want to go to this other part of the city and play. And people from all over the city, they meet. And I think this is a very good example on how the physical environment really can connect people. And I think that that is the first step for peace and justice and strong relations and institutions. So is it just me working like this? Is it just the national agency in Sweden thinking like this? Of course not. This is an architecture guide to the UN Sustainable. You can find this on the internet. This is 2 Danish documents, and also World Congress of Architects have examples that are going in this way. More examples. So look at the internet if you want to have more examples on this from other countries. But what do we do at Boverket, this national agency of housing, building and planning? We work with the building and spreading knowledge, building networks, policy making, financing, and so on. I told you before. And we just started our work, actually. We started it in 2018. I started my work in 2019. So we've just been working for 2 years. And that's not a long time when you are working with changing a society. So we started with the tasks that we got from the government, the commission, and it's about environments that really affects all people in Sweden. Healthcare facilities, schools, and so on, and how we can help quality in purchase in all cities in Sweden, for example, to raise the quality, to make people think that quality, if you really build with high quality, that is going to be very valuable in the long term and so on. And we support regions, government agencies, and so on, work with legislation. And we are spreading knowledge about, we have learning examples, we're visiting places all over Sweden and spreading knowledge about those examples. And we're doing guidelines for the people, and not just architects, but maybe more for the project managers in this area and so on, so they can do good projects in the future in Sweden. So schools, preschools, and so on. And building knowledge, spreading the knowledge wide, working with cities, and we have done our first job on architecture policies in municipalities. We made guidelines for this, and now, actually, I hear that a lot of cities in Sweden are going to develop architecture policies on a very top level in each city in Sweden. So that's very, very good. Several cities already done this, and this is some example of Uppsala, Malmö, and Stockholm doing this already. And now the smaller cities in Sweden, they're following this example. Coordinating the state agencies, as I said before. And this is all about architecture and using it as a tool for meeting societal challenges. It's about daily life for people. And it's about thinking it's not sustainable if it's not well designed and pleasant. If I take this example from the city planning level that I took before, if you're going to make people put the car to the side and walk or take a bicycle from your home to your school. It's got to be possible to take your car or your bicycle or walk. And if it's also easy, it's even better, and safe, it's even better. But if it's also pleasant and it's a nice designed living environment, then more people actually will take their bicycle or walk. And I know because the researchers are saying so, and there's evidence on this. We need to have a holistic approach. We need to hook arm with a lot of people to make this happen. We need to work nationally and locally at the same time. Urban planning scaled and detail scaled. We need to think, plan, build, manage all the way. We need to look at the physical environment and how it's really designed and the process in doing so. We need to engage citizens as well as policymakers, practitioners, researchers. It's about nature and culture, human being and the environment. And is that new, thinking like that? No, this is, Rome 2000 years ago, thinking holistic on architecture and built environment. Vitruvius said that architecture needs to have this holistic approach, that all that you build, you should think of utility, sustainability, stability, and beauty at the same time. Not choose one of them, all of it at the same time. And building sustainable and with high quality, you need to think long term. And that's the switch that we need to do in our head and in the people who are project managers and so on. And this is not easy. It's about transformation. It's about transformation on a whole society. And then you need knowledge. You need tools, legislation, for example, power, maybe money. You need people who are committed, people who want to. You need will, and you need leadership on all levels. And of course, you need cooperation, because this is not a one-man show or a one-woman show. This is about hooking arm with a lot of people and together walk in this direction. And we're trying to make places in Sweden that all people can be proud of for a long, long term. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. Thanks so much. We have a couple of questions from the audience and from myself as well. But actually, the first I want to ask, you showed us a lot of, we can all agree on the development goals, and these are, of course, things that people find consensus on. But you work with a lot of different agencies which have a lot of different goals, practical goals. How hard is it to actually find a consensus between, the innovation agency, between the environmental? How do you work with that? That must be a lot of diplomacy.
Well, it's always hard to find consensus, and it's hard to find consensus on all levels. And we're working with missions now a lot, actually, and trying in different projects to use the Mishra Method that is developed by London School of Economics, Stanford, etc. And that's the same method as Horizon Europe works with right now. And actually, it's a lot like how you work as an architect. It's about putting the issue, maybe the place in the middle, put a lot of people around the table and really think around this issue. How are we going to solve this problem in different ways? It's hard to give a very, very quick resume of, but we work with the innovation agency, and we have all those methods that we try. And actually, as I said, as to be trained as an architect is also to be trained to have all those different wills, different things that you need to put together as a whole. So really, we as architects, we are trained to do this. We are trained to work together with a lot of people who wants different things, and come up with an idea, innovate an idea, invent an idea that really works for mostly everybody.
And the relationship between a city architect, because a city architect is something that we know how it works and we have here in the Czech Republic. So how is that between the state architect and then the city one? If I'm a city architect, what guidance or what finance or what can I ask from your office to kind of provide me with, for example?
Yeah, the cities in Sweden, they are very, very, they decide a lot. So the national level, not even the Minister of Housing, can decide what the cities should do or should not do according to building and developing cities and so on. So they decide for themselves. And what we can do on the national level is work with the legislation. We can work with carrots, financing support, and so on. We can work with spreading knowledge, building networks. And for example, I have a network with all the city architects in Sweden, and we meet and we discuss the things that they want to discuss, that they want to help with, and we help each other. So I see it as one of those hooking arm projects. I cannot say to a city architect, you should do this or you should not do that, but we can help each other. And I think that's a more sustainable way and will work better in the long term, actually.
So the cities themselves, they're quite independent, right? So they're
very independent. Yeah, that's the word.
Yes, and they also, so for example, when it comes to building laws and construction laws, each city has a bit of a different rule, or is there one, construction law for everything?
There is one construction law, and that's the law that we are working with. Okay. So they all, we have the same law for all the cities in Sweden. And we have the same rules for all cities in Sweden. But then so they need to follow the law, and they need to follow the rules, of course. But then they're very independent in the rest of the decisions. And the city architects, they report to their boss and their political leaders in the city, of course.
Okay.
And I report to the government. So, of course, the politicians can also talk to each other, but the government cannot decide on the politicians in the cities are very independent too.
Because there's, of course, cities have different scales, and this is a big topic for us here in the Czech Republic because we're in the middle of drafting a new construction law which kind of treats all cities the same. But of course, you have different sizes. Stockholm has a subway, but Lund doesn't have a subway. So how do you kind of make differences between the size of a city? Do you have sort of influence over that, or is that more independent?
Yeah, we have actually. We're looking upon the building rules right now, and we're trying to change them to really make them work for all in a better way, and also make them good for innovation. We don't think that we on a national level should say you need to have 2 meters in every home right here. We think that we should say that you need to have those functions in every home, and how you design that function, how you make that happen. That's, can you decide in the projects. So you need to find the level of steering and on the national level, so it's not too into detail, but it steers on a good level, so that you have the innovation power in the projects and in the cities there.
Could you also maybe elaborate a little bit about housing in Sweden? Because I think it's, I only remember that when I was studying there and trying to desperately find an apartment in Lund, but like there's a big public sector housing, right? And I remember my friends always telling me, you have to get on this queue when you're born, and then when you're 20, you maybe get an apartment. Of course, that's an oversimplification, but what is this system? How does it work?
Mm-hmm. We have a lot of rental apartments that are owned by the cities, and then you have this system with the you need to stand in a line, you know, maybe for ages and so on, and then we have the apartments that you buy. Don't really know all those words in English actually, but you have the apartments that you buy, and they're up on the free market, and highest bid wins the apartment actually. So and then we have all the homes, the single family homes, of course, as you do too. But we have this big sector of publicly owned rental apartments. But there's also rental regulation on a national level that says that the rent should be equal if you live in this part of the city or in that part of the city, or in a small city or a big city. It should be equal type of rent. So that's good in one way, but bad in another way. And we see that we don't have enough homes in Sweden right now. We don't have enough homes for people who have small income. So we have and we also have more and more big families living in those rental homes, and the rental apartments are usually very kind of small. So we need more big apartments, more big rental apartments for people with, you know, small wallets. So we really have a challenge here, and there's right now the government put one of their former ministers on a big. Should really be. Do a big thinking about this and how we can plan this in the future. So it's a lot of thinking is done right now.
What about the private sector? How do you work as a state architect with the private sector? What sort of tools do you have? How do you include them? Is it difficult?
So far I haven't been working with the private sector so much because the commitment that the government gave us says that we should work with the public sector first. Mm-hmm. And as we've been working for 1.5, 2 years, we've been working with focusing on the public sector first. And it's the public sector that acts really as they have the planning monopoly in Sweden. So it's very, very important to work with the different cities because they have the plan monopoly. And what they plan, that's really what the private sector can build. So it's actually the city telling the private sector you can build here and it should be designed in this way or in that way. So it's that's why it's so important to work with public sector and the cities, because it's the cities that really point out the direction for the private sector. But of course, the private sector is a very innovative sector, and I think they have a lot of good thinking how we can solve those big problems together with them. So really, I want to see more collaboration with the private sector in the future and invite them to work together with us in different projects, because I think that's a very good thing to do to get new ideas and get the development going faster. But
Swedish cities in general, they still own quite a lot of land, right?
Yes, they do.
So they is our Swedish cities or state, for that matter, kind of working as sort of a developer a lot? Is there a lot of you know, town rental housing being?
Yes, some cities are. A lot of cities did that in the 60s and 70s, and then they just worked with managing the houses that they have. But recently, in the recent years, some new, actually, publicly owned companies started. For example, in Gothenburg, where I worked before, they started a new company building new homes, public homes. And that's very good. Otherwise, the cities still own a lot of land, and they can make detailed plans for the land that they own themselves, and then they can work with other types of legislation to make the developers build more sustainable, or in another way, and so on. So
we have
there are several different legislations that the cities can work with, both the planning and building legislation, but also another legislation that is really more into when you sell the public land, you can say that you who buy this land, you need to do this and this and this.
Yeah. So we have one question here from the audience, and I guess it follows up on what you were saying about having this network of city architects and speaking to each of them. So is there one common problem that you think all of Swedish cities are facing at the moment? What are the sort of the common themes?
It's the long-term planning. That's a lot of Swedish cities are working with budgets that are just 1 year long, and therefore it's very, very hard in an economic way, and therefore also in a planning city scale, to see the long-term perspective. And a lot of decisions are made because they're good right now, this year, in this budget. But you don't see that to raise quality, you need to see long-term. Maybe you need to, invest more year 1, but you will get values year 10. And it's very hard to change that way of thinking. And we will not raise the quality in our built environment if we cannot change this way of thinking. So the long-term thinking in planning, building, is very, very important. And that's the hardest issue for the cities.
I assume that it must, at this sort of hard time of the pandemic and everything, I guess health isn't also a huge issue that you deal with. So is there sort of one common approach that all the cities coordinate, or is it more each city their own different way? How have you felt that was being handled?
We have this health policy, of course, for all Sweden if we're going to be in the lockdown or not. But actually how we're going to handle this issue in the long-term city planning and building, we are still in, I guess, the same phase as you are, thinking how can this pandemic, how can it affect us? How can it affect the building, the planning sector? And we made this Arkitekter, that is our partner in this, made this inquiry with people this spring. And they said that one of the things that people in Sweden are most concerned of right now is public realms, parks, squares, nature areas, and the need of having those close to where you live and having them well managed, having them well designed, and so on. And that's the thing that people in Sweden lifted as the most important issue in city planning and architecture right now. And I think that's an answer that we get because of the pandemic, and that so many people have been working at home and really being, that's the place to meet when you go out to the park, to the public realm. That's when you meet other people, and you need to do that right now, because otherwise you're so isolated. So it's a very important question.
So I'd like to end this on another question from the audience, just to close this up. So what do you think will be the ideal Swedish city of 2050? What will it look like?
A city that we are really, really proud of in all ways. It's sustainable, it's pleasant, it's nice to live in, and we're very proud of it. Then it will be good. And I think that we are working we're talking to the politicians on a governmental level now, and we're hoping to have a world exhibition to 2030 in Sweden. We're hoping to do that.
Wow.
And if we are doing that, everybody's welcome, of course, to Sweden. And you can come before that too, of course.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation and for taking our questions. This was Helena Bjarnegård. She's the state architect of Sweden. And if you want to see our other urban talks, you can go to urbantalks.camp. And we have a lot of fun events planned for you in the upcoming months. So thank you for watching. Again, thank you, Helena, for joining us, and see you soon.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.